You're listening to BioTalk with Rich Bendis, the only podcast focused on the BioHealth Capital Region. Each episode, we'll talk to leaders in the industry to break down the biggest topics happening today in BioHealth.
Hi, this is Rich Bendis, your host for BioTalk. And today we are pleased to have one of the stars within our region that has been rapidly growing. It's become a global household name and is really on the front lines of the COVID-19 and pandemic battleground right now. And we have John Trizzino, who's the Executive Vice President, Chief Business Officer, and CFO of Novavax, who is well known in this region and going to talk to us about this exciting growth that they've experienced over the last 12 months. John, welcome to BioTalk.
Well, thanks for that introduction, Richard. It's a pleasure to be here.
There's a lot of people that know you from your past days with a number of the other bio companies and Medi in this region, but there's a number of people that don't know John Trizzino. So why don't we start for our listeners, and why don't you go through a little bit of your bio background here in the region?
It's been exciting. I've been in the region for over 14 years now. Originally came in with an exciting opportunity with MedImmune in the commercial organization, and there for about a year before and a few years after the AstraZeneca acquisition, and just decided to stay in this terrific biotech community, and then moved on to Novavax and have been with Novavax ever since. And the community of people, the biotech community, both the science side and the business side, has just been a wonderful contribution to my career. Exciting to be part of it, and especially now excited to contribute to the region with our growth and our success here and for many more years to come.
Well, let's talk a little bit about your transition into Novavax. What was it that attracted you to Novavax? And then also, let's give a little brief history on Novavax because it's been around for a few years.
Novavax was founded in 1987 and has evolved over the years, with initially not even in the vaccine business, interestingly, and then evolved into a focus on influenza vaccine. People in the area may recall that we received a very significant BARDA contract back about 8 years ago for influenza pandemic. And it was a great opportunity then for the company, and pursued that, and then went on and expanded the pipeline of activities at Novavax into RSV, respiratory syncytial virus vaccines. And so we've been in this kind of infectious disease, respiratory disease arena for a long while now. And while both programs, our influenza vaccine and RSV vaccines, moved along quite successfully through great data in phase 1 and phase 2, we unfortunately had a few setbacks with our RSV vaccine candidate, not because we didn't see success in the data, but when you're at the cutting edge of a first-in-class vaccine, you make some assumptions about what those phase 3 designs are going to be, what the attack rates are going to be, and unfortunately came up on the short end of our primary objectives in both of those phase 3 assets. But we never lost confidence in our technology platform. We never lost confidence in the ability of everybody here within the organization. And it was the typical biotech roller coaster ride. I often tell people biotech is not for the faint of heart, and that's true again here. And so you say, listen, we believe in the company, we believe in the people, let's press on. And that's what we've done over the past several years. And then advancing a new flu candidate recently. And the only expectation that we had for 2020 at the end of 2019 and the beginning of 2020 was that we'd be reading out influenza phase 3 data. And we were very pleased that that data readout for phase 3 was a huge success. We hit all of our primary objectives, but oh, by the way, comes along a coronavirus pandemic, and not initially knowing what that had in store for us. And we moved further along with all of our plans for filing a BLA for influenza vaccine while beginning our process to developing a coronavirus vaccine candidate. And that very quickly kind of took over everything that we were doing. So I think the introduction part of your question is, well, tell us a little bit about Novavax, and I'll evolve that and relate that to where we are today. Is everything that we've done in the last 10 years that I've been with the company. And every success and every failure prepared us for where we are today with our coronavirus vaccine candidate. We have a technology platform. We have a science infrastructure from a discovery and development perspective. We know and have extensive experience in knowing how to run clinical trials. We understand what that development cycle is, and we leveraged every bit and piece of that experience so that as the coronavirus pandemic worsened, we responded very quickly and very appropriately to all of those particular needs. In the virus identification from early in January to identifying the genetic sequence to getting into identifying a vaccine candidate into clinical trials was everything that we had been working for and everything that we had been prepared for. So all of that kind of vaccine development work in the early days with flu and then through RSV created this opportunity that we have today.
Thanks for that background, John. And you talk about the roller coaster effect, and there's certainly a lot of bio companies around the world that go through that roller coaster. But I guess what was the pivotal moment for Novavax where you said, well, we can really do something in this COVID-19 pandemic? And when was it that you made a decision to go all in on trying to come up with a vaccine?
It was almost immediately. As I said, we were still waiting on our phase 3 flu data, but we knew that we needed to do something. There was a tremendous amount of interest early on. When the first few cases came to the US, there was a lot of questions about, well, what response should we have? What could we do? Is it possible to do a vaccine? Questions kept coming in. Novavax, do you have any experience in coronavirus vaccines? And the answer was we did. We had done some early work in SARS and MERS and therefore knew what steps we needed to take. And what we needed to do is identify this latest strain of a coronavirus, this SARS-2 virus. And we began to do that almost immediately, isolating the strain, identifying the genetic sequence, working with our discovery and development teams to make sure we were able to do something, and then talking to the key opinion leader community around the globe. We had already had established a working relationship with the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation because of our RSV vaccine. And so as the global community began to respond to the pandemic, inquiries were coming into us about, can you use your platform technology to assist with this? And so the answer was absolutely, we can. And we also have a novel and proprietary adjuvant technology that we're using, this Matrix M technology that many of you, I'm sure, have heard us talk about over the last several months. And so the combination of the work we were doing on our antigen, our technology platform, our ability to use our manufacturing capabilities and get it into the clinic all came together very quickly. We then got the attention of some global organizations. So CEPI, the Coalition for Epidemic Preparedness and Innovation. And they were tremendous support for the organization right out of the gate, saying, we need you to respond quickly. We want to fund much of your early activities. They were tremendous help very early on.
And that was about $400 million in help.
Yeah, and honestly had never expected that kind of support and certainly never dreamed of what the US government would be backing. So we headed down this path at risk at first. We were then supported with some initial funding from CEPI of about $14 or $15 million at the time, a first kind of phase funding. Then they came back and said, listen, we need you to do a clinical trial. We need to do large-scale manufacturing. We've seen the data coming from your early animal studies, and we want to make sure you're moving forward as quickly as you possibly can. And they came forward with a $388 million funding mechanism, which was just a fantastic support and boost to the company. And then shortly after that, we then were able to get the attention of the Department of Defense and had some funding coming in from them. And then almost immediately after Operation Warp Speed was formed, they came knocking on our door as well. And we had several weeks where our conversations of that with them needed to be kept very quiet, and we were getting lots of inquiries. Well, why aren't you working with Operation Warp Speed? Why aren't you doing this or that? And of course, until the commitment is made, you can't have a conversation about it. but it was clear that they had a very specific mission. They wanted to move very quickly. And what very quickly means is a vaccine development cycle is normally 6 to 8 years. And we're doing something in 6 to 8 months. So that meant that many things had to run in a parallel pathway. And that's exactly what Operation Warp Speed, as well as CEPI, was funding, was this ability to run multiple clinical trials simultaneously, was to spend on GMP manufacturing scale up. And typically that waits until after phase 1 or phase 2, not during phase 1 and phase 2. And so you move very quickly at risk with a variety of things happening in order to make sure that you can shrink those timelines as much as you possibly can.
Yeah, I think as we go through the different life cycles of different bio companies, we're always dialing for dollars. You're always looking for money to get to the next step. And I'm sure there were times over the last couple of years where you were dialing for dollars as you were going through some of the clinical challenges you had. But isn't it nice to have people knocking on your door saying, we have some money for you, John? Is there anything we can do to help you grow a little bit faster than where you're going? I mean, it must be an interesting transition to have to go through that, but also create some additional challenges because you're looking for resources, then all of a sudden you got all the resources in the world you need. And then how do you manage that complicated process?
A couple of comments about that, because it's really important. I mentioned this a little bit earlier in our conversation, but it's a function of having done much of this work before. It's a function of having the technology platform. It's not like we wake up one morning and say, oh, yes, by the way, in fact, we can develop a vaccine. Well, we can do it because we've done it before. We had experience with coronaviruses before. We've worked on multiple vaccine candidates before. So we understand what we're doing with a nanoparticle recombinant protein vaccine technology and leveraged our experience and expertise in order to do that again in a very urgently needed response.
The other thing that's refreshing is it's nice to have the BioHealth Capital Region with a number of partners that you can work with in your own backyard. And the announcement with Emergent, really neat to have two companies that in that close proximity with a lot of people that potentially worked with each other in different companies coming together to work again under this new project.
Really early on, it was extraordinarily collaborative. As we said, you rely upon a community of people that we've worked with before, help getting the virus strain, help taking that virus strain and turning it into a genetic sequence, working with the contract manufacturing community like Emergent Biosolutions, and they responded very quickly and were happy to work with us. And we're still working with them, but they moved on and helping Operation Warp Speed with some other manufacturing needs. And so we then went off in another direction, working with Fuji instead of Emergent Biosolutions. But that's okay because the resources were made available. They were made available at the time. Those needs evolved. And in conversations and collaborations with the US government and what resources are available, all of those things worked out fine, but those resources were available at the ready, and we were able to take advantage of that at the time.
And it's not just the U.S. government. You've had exposure to other governments around the world, too, because you've got a partnership now with South Korea and UK. You want to talk a little bit about those, too?
That's even quite an incredible experience, too, is because on one hand, we could have simply said, well, we're going to stay in our very narrow, comfortable swim lane working within the Maryland community, and that would have been great. And we could have done really well and even expanded that to some US-based CMOs. But we realized that this is a global crisis and we needed to respond globally. And having received the funding from CEPI gave us the resources to go and expand globally. So in addition to all of the development work that we were doing, we also had the opportunity to acquire a manufacturing facility just outside of Prague in the Czech Republic, which was a facility that used to manufacture influenza vaccine and had become available to us. And we took advantage of acquiring that facility. And that's never a small task either. So a new manufacturing facility looking for CMOs around the globe at SK Bio. We had a licensing deal with Takeda for Japan. We also just recently announced a collaboration and partnering with the UK government to do a phase 3 clinical trial and expand our manufacturing resources through yet another Fuji film diethylene manufacturing facility in the UK. And so these global collaborations were kind of expanding the amount of product that we could manufacture on a global scale, both from an antigen standpoint as well as from an adjuvant standpoint, with companies like AGC helping us on the adjuvant side, polypeptide, having facilities available in Europe as well as facilities available in the US. So our response and the response of our partners has just been tremendous.
Congratulations on the way all those things have come together. But one of the things that everybody wonders is when you're growing so rapidly and so globally, how do you find the talent that you need in the company? Because I know that there's been a lot of additions at the senior level, at the board level, the tech level, the research scientist level. So talk a little bit about how you've had to evolve the company and grow your talent at the same time.
Well, there's such a great talent pool here in Maryland and Montgomery County. And so we've just simply tapped into that. People like to be part of a win or two, so you can't help but leverage the fact. I mean, let's think about this. This pandemic is probably a once in a career or once in a lifetime opportunity to come up with a vaccine solution. So anybody that's been in any way, shape, or form part of vaccine development or vaccine manufacturing or vaccine commercialization or any kind of infrastructure support from a supply chain perspective says, I would love to be part of this. I'd love to be part of one of, hopefully will be many solutions to a COVID vaccine. And if I have a chance to do that, then I want to be part of whatever Novavax is doing to come up with that solution. And so I think we're seeing a lot of talent coming to the table as a result of that, and they see a great team being built. So you make a couple of very key hires to expand the organization. People say, well, if that person is coming to the organization, then I'd like to be part of that team as well. And it kind of one feeds on the next, and you're suddenly in high demand.
The other thing, it's not just the people, it's facilities. And I know that you're going through some expansion with facilities and some right here in the backyard, right in Montgomery County. Talk a little bit about your facility expansion as well.
Interestingly, that's part of the roller coaster ride story as well. So post the maternal RSV failure announcement, early part of 19, we had to do some soul searching and figure out, well, okay, organizationally, what are we going to do? We took a hit on our stock price. We had to do a little bit of a staffing adjustment. And then right about mid last year, we also ended up downsizing some of our manufacturing facilities. And that was a very, very difficult decision at the time. But having no way to identify what 2020 would be like, we made this decision to transition 2 of our manufacturing facilities to the Catalent Paragon group. And it was the right decision at the time. And it left us, frankly, a little bit naked from a manufacturing standpoint, but we knew that we could recover from that, and we did, and we have very successfully. And so we retained 2 of the 4 facilities and now have our eye on whatever additional expansion that we could do in the area. And we're getting a very positive response from Montgomery County, a very positive response from Maryland. Still some decisions left to be made about what that expansion is ultimately going to look like and exactly where it's going to be. But we're hopeful that we can have the right economic incentives in order to close those expansion opportunities and those expansion deals within the county.
Yeah, and what's encouraging about what you just said is that you mentioned Montgomery County and Maryland. So, I mean, the key is based on the talent, the resources you have here, it still sounds like Novavax is extremely committed to Maryland and the Montgomery County region and trying to build as much as you can locally.
That's right, because there is so much talent here. What is the original MedImmune organization, now the AZ organization, they've expanded dramatically in the region as well over the last few years. GSK demonstrated some expansion in the region for several years as well. But not to mention, you've got NIH in your backyard and FDA in your backyard and some great universities at Shady Grove and University of Maryland and Hopkins University. So you got this tremendous talent pool available to you in the area that we're trying to take advantage of as best we can.
That's a great advertorial for the BioHealth Capital Region, John. I think we'll
It
use
certainly
that.
is.
Yeah.
But it's true.
Yeah,
I don't
right.
think it gets enough credit. And frankly, at times, I don't think that we take advantage of it enough. But here's a perfect example of what's possible. And we should highlight that and wave the flag to say that we are a top biotech community. We should not be overlooked or overshadowed. And here's what we're capable of doing.
Well, I don't know if you've been following it, but Genetic Engineering News does their biopharma cluster ranking every year. And this region, which now has been rebranded to the BioHealth Capital Region, used to be number 6, but now we're number 4. We bypassed Research Triangle in San Diego, and our goal is to be top 3 by 2023. And that means we have to bypass New York because Boston and San Francisco are somewhat in a league of their own just because of the different asset base they have there. But we think that we can be in the top 3 within the next couple of years. And what your success is doing right now is also shining a light on this region to show how deep the assets go within there. You mentioned FDA and NIH and AZ and Hopkins and Shady Grove and basically 800 companies in this cluster. It's very hard to duplicate what we have in this region anyplace else in the world.
I think the whole biohealth region and the variety of organizations that we're part of and board members of in the region, we've been driving for that goal for years now. Your organization, the Maryland Tech Council, all of these organizations collectively are doing great good for the region. It's all very positive. We're all focused on the same mission and objective. And I think we're creating a biotech community here that is, as you just said, is accomplishing the goals that we've set forth to do over the last 4 or 5 years.
Definitely. And then the only mistake I've made is that I saw a little financial report today that if someone had invested $1,000 in Novavax in January, what it would be worth today. And I think that 1,000, if I'm not mistaken, it might have been like 34,000. Does that sound right?
That's right. I think I told you a quick story before we started taping today that there's an annual biotech conference in San Francisco, JP Morgan Week, that everybody in the biotech community participates in. And we were sitting there getting ready for our JP Morgan presentation to talk about the excitement that we were looking forward to for our NanoFlu phase 3 data, having absolutely no idea what we were in store for at the beginning of the year, and a little bit low on cash, a little bit low on market cap. We had just transitioned several of our facilities out to other organizations, and we were determined to hang in there and persevere, and that's what we did, but could not in a million years have imagined that we'd be thrown into globally one of the top 6 organizations that are charged with coming up with a vaccine, but also to have kind of a renewed confidence from a financial markets perspective. And I think that's just kind of a side benefit. Anybody who's been in the vaccine space at all in their career truly values the contribution that we have the potential to make from a public health perspective. And I think most people don't understand the pride we have in participating in that and the contribution that we're going to make to public health, and the ability to make a little return on that investment at the same time is icing on the cake. But I think we have some real satisfaction in contributing to the benefits of global public health.
There's no question about that, John. And I think the key is people tend to focus on some of the wrong metrics sometimes when they look at the growth of companies. And ultimately, the goal of all of the companies in the biohealth field is to improve the quality of life and try to reduce the number of deaths, especially with what we're dealing with this pandemic right now. So congratulations to everything that has been accomplished in this short term. Let's talk a little bit about the future now. We know sort of what the short term is. You're trying to be one of the first in class with the vaccines around the world that will address this pandemic. But when you look beyond COVID-19, what do you see as the future for Novavax 3-5 years out with this new platform that you've developed?
That's a great question, and it opens the door to why biotechs, we keep referring it to as a roller coaster ride. But from a coronavirus vaccine perspective, certainly this pandemic period is going to be critically important to the organization. Continuing to demonstrate good data in the phase 2 that we just announced yesterday is starting the phase 2 portion of our phase 1-2 trial that began several months ago. continuing through into the phase 3 trial that's being funded by Operation Warp Speed, and then ultimately getting licensed product out to where it's most needed, not only in the US, but around the globe. And that's during the pandemic period. I think there's some expectation that you're going to see this continue in a post-pandemic period. Will this turn into an annual seasonal vaccine need like influenza? And if it does, we have to be prepared for that as well. And I think we're already thinking about what that's going to mean in the US and globally. So there's a tremendous amount of work being done to satisfy the current needs, to plan for what would be a regularly vaccinated vaccine in the future, again, in the US and around the globe. But it also gives us the opportunity, again, we don't want to forget about NanoFlu. So NanoFlu was all we had back in January. We were trying to remind everybody that don't forget Novavax. We're still a player here. We still have some things that we need to do. And so NanoFlu is still critically important. And we want to make sure that the attention and time commitment comes back to supporting a pathway to licensure, submitting the BLA, and commercializing NanoFlu, because we believe it's a highly differentiated vaccine. We've demonstrated that it performs better than some of the existing influenza vaccines. We've learned a lot about our technology platform. We've learned a lot about the use of our adjuvant technology, which hadn't been used with RSV before. And so we would hope to get back into clinical trials with an RSV vaccine as well. And of course, a demonstrated success in an emerging infectious disease means that we have a technology platform that could be called upon again to solve an emerging infectious disease problem in the future. And I think one of the lessons learned globally is that while we may have pulled a real rabbit out of our hat in coming up with a vaccine for a coronavirus in a very short period of time, that's an impossibly difficult thing to do. And the tremendous amount of resources that were put forth and the need basically to shut down the global economy for some period of time says that we need to be better prepared in the future for what the next significant emerging infectious disease is. And I think that's going to change the way that discovery and development activities are funded into the future. So I think you've got 4 immediate paths that we will be pursuing. So certainly the work that we're doing for a coronavirus vaccine, that's before we even talk about whatever other possibilities that might be there for bringing other vaccine companies earlier stage into the Novavax infrastructure to kind of expand what we do from a business development standpoint. So I think lots of opportunity and lots of promise for Novavax now and into the future.
One of the things I like about what you just said is that we need to talk about how do we become proactive in the future rather than reactive. And you wouldn't know about this because you guys are so focused, but there's a group down, the Greater Washington Board of Trade has a 100-person task force talking about how do you reemerge out of this pandemic and make this region stronger economically. And one of the things that just came up last week is they voted to look at doing a study on a pandemic prevention and defense center that would be a global center located in this region. No better place to have it in Montgomery County because we have all the assets there. And I'd love to follow up with you a little bit about this after this call because they really want to put a steering committee and a task force together to make that happen, especially when you have the federal government thinking the way they are right now, and there might be billions of dollars to help build something like that right here in our backyard.
Yeah, Rich, well, I said multiple times during this conversation how we've been preparing for this activity for the last 10 plus years of Novavax history. And we don't like to think about how old we all are, but the 20 or 30 years of our career have prepared us for this moment. And we're leveraging all of those experiences and all of that expertise. But at the same time, we've also learned a tremendous amount during this period of time about, one, what should we do differently the next time, but also what we should be doing for the future. And I think those lessons learned are tremendously important. And I think that what we've learned during these last several months should not be lost. And we should document these things, and we should prepare a case study of what happened in January, what happened when we first knew about the virus, what was the first few steps that we were able to take. Can we even shorten this cycle of development even more based upon what we have learned from this development and discovery exercise, and apply that to the next time, knowing that funding needs to be made available for this early development. We need to identify platform technologies. We know the benefit of new and modern and safe adjuvant technologies and platforms. And I think all of those can be brought to bear in what you just described. And I think that would be a tremendous thing that we should do.
You sound like a member of the steering committee, John. You have nothing else to do right now, I know.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, right. By the way, for the listeners, we're talking to John Trizzino, the Executive Vice President, Chief Business Officer, and CFO of Novavax, who's very busy these days. But we've covered a lot of ground here, and I want to make certain that you get everything out that you'd like to enlighten our listeners about related to what you guys are doing right now. Is there anything that we didn't talk about that you feel is important for our listeners to hear?
I'm confident we missed something. I'm not sure what that is at the moment, other than to reiterate the fact that it's dedicated, it's passionately working towards a solution. It's never clear and it's never obvious. You make mistakes along the way. You turn failure into success, and you have to continuously maintain your optimism. We've got a tremendous management team here. Stan Erck, the CEO of the organization of Novavax, his persistence and dedication to this Novavax organization, to the team of people that we have here. A great thanks to all of the people here at Novavax, the people that have been here a long time, the new people, the people that have left along the way, which they had to because of career decisions and family decisions. And hopefully they can have some satisfaction to having been part of it in the development cycle. But all of it contributes to a successful organization and a successful community of people. And so, as I said, well, I'm sure we've missed something. I think a lot of thanks needs to be given to a lot of people along the way. And I think not only do I hope that we can contribute in the form of having a licensable vaccine, but contribute, as you said, to what the future has and what can we do better the next time and all of the lessons that we've learned. And so I appreciate the opportunity to share those things with you. And hopefully there are a few people that will kind of hear these words of wisdom and maybe do something with them. But thanks for the opportunity.
That's great. And I'd be remiss if I didn't ask one last question, which you never get. And that's, when do you think we're going to have a vaccine globally available?
Yeah, we kind of get that question asked every day.
I'm sure you do. If I didn't do that, I wouldn't be a good interviewer.
If you would have asked me that question 3 or 4 months ago, I would have probably told you well into 2021. And I think you had some of the best epidemiologists that were up on stage giving updates back 3 and 4 months ago who said, oh, it's at least a year and a half away at the best case scenario. All of these pieces have to come together. So we're beginning our large scale manufacturing as we speak. There will be product available, or product manufactured, I should say, before the end of the year. But there's clinical trial activity that's underway. So will there be enough clinical data to make the product that is available ready to be vaccinated before the end of the year? And that remains to be seen. We've seen the administration, specifically the FDA, just this past weekend, use emergency use authorization for a therapeutic for convalescent sera. And in some ways that made people a little bit nervous about, well, maybe we don't need a vaccine. Well, of course you need a vaccine.
Sure you do.
This is just one other solution. And so that gave us confidence to say that emergency use authorization is available to be used and is being used. And so therefore, that gives us hope that maybe emergency use authorization could be, again, leveraged to have vaccine available sooner. We also heard over the last couple of days that AstraZeneca is moving along very quickly, their partnership with Oxford University, and that they might get licensed ahead of others.
Well, the most important thing you said, though, is that in this competitive environment of who's going to be first, it doesn't make any difference, because whatever happens, we're going to try to reduce the number of deaths the sooner we get something out there, whoever gets it there.
That's exactly right. That's our mission.
And that's the mission for the whole bio community that we're all working in, John. So
exactly.
This has been very enlightening, and I've learned a lot by just talking to you about everything that's going on today. and I'm sure the listeners have too. So thank you very much for coming on. And again, we've been talking with John Trizzino, the Executive Vice President, Chief Business Officer, and CFO of Novavax. And I don't know if you want to bet against these guys right now. I think that they have as good a shot as anybody about being the first out there. So, John, good luck with everything.
Well, thanks for giving me a forum to share all of our experiences with your audience. And Rich, great to see you. Hopefully we'll have a chance to meet in person again soon. But the quarantine is keeping us all separated for good reason. But thanks. Enjoyed the conversation. Enjoyed the opportunity to chat about it. Thank you.
Next glass of wine will be on me whenever we get to be in person, John. So thank you.
Great. Thank you very much.
Thanks for listening to BioTalk with Rich Bendis.